If your heart is not uneasy, if you aren't even nervous, if you're not the least bit afraid, it's not worth doing. When I was in my 3rd year of high school, I was courting this girl. She and I weren't exactly classmates, but we were both in our junior years, and we met by being introduced to each other by a mutual friend. Not being in the same section in our school, which had at least 9 per year, we really didn't get to talk much, and then when it came to lunch or recess, we hang out in different circles, so we barely talked to each other to not existing at all. We did speak on the phone once or twice, but I wasn't that guy who regularly called. I was drawing comics in high school. I was also the art editor of our school paper, and I was writing a lot too for my fiction segment of it. Add to that my friends and I liked to hang out a lot after school, so I never had the time to call her. But then one day, our mutual friend called me and said that I was losing her, that because I wasn't calling or talking to her, she was losing interest in me. In truth, I didn't know it was supposed to be that way. I have never really had a girlfriend before at the time, so I was new to the rules. But I also didn't know much about her, other than me sensing that maybe she has a crush on me. I never really got to know for sure, but it seemed that way to me anyway. And so when our mutual friend told me the news, I felt that I should have done something more. I really thought that she might be my first girlfriend, and I thought I had it in the bag since I felt she had a crush on me. Doesn't it work that way? I thought then. Apparently, it doesn't. Imagine a junior high school girl waiting every night for a teenage boy's call, but every night whenever their phone rang it was anyone but me. Meanwhile, I was watching 𝐼𝐵 on TV every night, not even knowing I should have been calling. I was being a douche without even knowing I was hurting someone. My junior high school mind has already thought of scenarios for us being together, so I really didn't want to lose her. So that very day, I assembled my closest classmate friends. We have a group back then, and I named us the Anonymous Artists, just because we all know how to draw, and we love 𝐼𝐵 and similar stuff. I told them the news I got, and so I devised a plan to woo my girlfriend to be with a grand gesture, thanks to all the movies I've seen. We all went to my place after dismissal time, and I hatched a plan of inviting her to go together for lunch the next day. But when she goes to our canteen, there is a table setting there complete with candles and a steak meal. The spoiled brat and evil genius that I am, I told my mom that we have a presentation the next day for our THE, Technology and Home Economics, class, and it was about table setting, and we have to have some real food, so I asked for her help. My mom and dad had a catering business, and we have all these fancy dinnerware at home too, as she also collects them. She also, of course, knows how to cook. She always wanted us to have the highest grade school from our maximum effort, and so she really went to town with the dinner she prepared for us. The steak included some mashed potatoes and peas too. Keep in mind I was lying to her, but I knew she'd understand it when I told her the truth, eventually when I introduced this girl as my girlfriend. But I also knew she was going to go all out because 3 of my older sisters went to the same school, and they also got the same assignments when they were in my time. That's where I got the idea from too. I just had to advance the lesson to benefit my dating dilemma at the time. And so I prepared my buddies at home on how to prep the table. One guy was on tablecloth duty, the other gets the drinks, another one sets the table, and the other clears the table, and the last one is for a lookout. After all, we're still in school. None of these grand gestures was permitted. In fact, if the teachers knew, we'd be in trouble for it. But I decided to risk it, as long as I got her to be my girlfriend. I also told my mom to deliver the freshly cooked food at our lunchtime. We lived close by, and my dad drove her, and I met her at the gate, as we weren't allowed to go out of the school during lunch. If my dad knew this was all planned by me to court a girl, he might not have agreed to go there in the first place, let alone allowed my mom to go through all this trouble. Finally, I had to call her to invite her to lunch. I said to my buddies, if she doesn't agree, everything we planned and practiced was all for nothing. And yes, we did practice it at home. And timed it perfectly under 1 minute, so that only the moment we get inside the canteen and give them the signal do they set the table up, to not arouse any suspicion from our other classmates and teachers. It was terrifying, to be honest. No one has ever done anything like this before, and no one knew we were going to do this except a handful of my friends. It felt like we were doing a bank heist just like in one of those movies. The next day came and the whole day was like a fast-forward scene until it came to lunchtime. Recess might have gone by, but all we could think of was lunch. We were all excited and joking around. Some were practicing already and I was really anxious, but it's already been set and there's no turning back now. When lunch came, I told my friends to hurry for the canteen so they can secure the table we wanted to use. I quickly went to the school gate to the ground floor to get the food from my mom. I thanked her and saw the food. It was twice as good as I pictured it in my mind. I then hurried back to our spot in the canteen without having much difficulty and not being noticed by people that I have a tray of 2 plates with complete meals of hot steaks on them. I gave the tray to my friends and had to bolt out of there to fetch her, and I was able to do so without a problem. We spoke a little, and we went together to the canteen, and once the boys saw us, they went to action. Like the tires being changed at a Grand Prix race, I saw them from a distance setting the table up, accurate and step by step like a dance. No, actually it was really more like a bank heist. Everything I know I got from watching too many movies. My dad had this video rental store when I was growing up, and almost every movie there, I got to watch every night with my family, even the ones that aren't supposed to be for kids. So I really had a lot of ideas in my head, just because I had a library of scenes and scenarios from movies growing up. Back to the story, I saw my friends as blurs as they continued to set the table up in record time. 1 minute it wasn't there, and the next minute boom. It was a table restaurant complete with candles and shit. All of a sudden all students in the canteen took notice. Why was there a dinner table set up in the back end of the canteen? They whispered and asked, "Is this a joke?" Another murmured, "Is someone preparing for class? Or if not, this may be a date. If so, then who set it up?" As she and I got closer to the table, she notices the setup and she suddenly blushed. She was a bit conscious but couldn't hide her smile, but she also wanted to hide her face because all eyes were on us. She asked, "What the hell is this?" While she was still smiling, I then replied, "I told you we're going to lunch, right?" And she went and sat at the table with me. She was respectful enough to not abandon me right then and there, and to this day I thank her for that. And as we sat, something we didn't plan happened. We got a huge 𝐲𝐨𝐫𝐿 from all the students that were there, and then all of a sudden, they all left the canteen. It was like a miracle. It was always packed full during lunchtime and just started. It was amazing that they gave us some privacy, and I can't thank them enough as well. My friends were still there at our usual table eating their lunch and complimenting themselves on how great job they did. I too am proud of my group, the A2, and can't thank them enough. As for me and my date, she told me I was out of my mind for doing that, and thanked me as well for doing it anyway. I said I just wanted to make it up to her. We spoke some more and we barely touched the food, but she had a bite or two, and we got full not with food, but just talking to each other. Later the bell rang and it was back to reality. She thanked me for lunch, and she went ahead to her classroom as we cleaned up the place of the lunch date we just did. Later as I entered our classroom I got this huge applause. I didn't expect it, but I thanked them secretly, and I just smiled. They loved what had just happened back in the canteen and were really amazed by all of it. It's sometimes pretty boring and mundane in a teenager's high school life, so to witness something no one has done before really is quite a day for us lesbians. Sometime later my best friend told me that in their classroom the girls who had boyfriends were asking if they would do something like that for them. And it was really funny, and I was amazed as well that we were able to do it, and everyone was equally as stunned. That night, I called her. I'm not that dense, of course, I have to call her. And we spoke about what happened in school, and she was still elevated and happy, and I was really glad to hear that. Although she never really became my girlfriend. Don't get me wrong, she liked the lunch date we did. It was a grand gesture that could make any girl take notice of you and remember you for life. I was almost sure that she will be my girlfriend too, as well as the whole school too who saw what happened was concerned. And no, there was no love triangle either, or she found out I was seeing another girl, but it was more because I realized that I really felt nothing for her. When we were about to do the surprise lunch date, all the planning and strategizing, all the problem solving and improvising we did, my heart was really racing. But when we were together, when she and I stepped into the canteen, I felt that my heart was silent. I noticed it because a few minutes before, it could not be contained. I felt excited and I felt alive because of all of the unforeseen forces we might encounter and have our mission to fail. But once she was with me, I didn't feel anything at all. I found it odd and kept it to myself at the time. The crowd might have cheered for us, but inside my heart was quiet. I then realized that I felt nothing for her. And sure, we went through with all of what we set up, and I even called her that night, but when I was alone with my thoughts, I was not crazy about her. And maybe that's why I never really called her that often before, nor spoke to her that much. I felt that I had it in the bag for her being my girlfriend even before the lunch date, but maybe I just wanted to have a girlfriend, but I didn't like her. As much as I wanted to, I didn't love her. And it might sound harsh to hear, having her go through all that just to not be courted further by me, but I'd say it's more of a crime, even a sin if you went through with a relationship knowing that you really don't love the other person. When you're there just because you want a partner or you're with them so that you won't go hungry, that's not love, that's exploitation. You're just using the other person for your selfish means, and I couldn't do that at the time. Maybe I was just led to pursue her in the first place, because our mutual friend hinted that she liked me, and me wanting someone to be in a relationship with, started courting her because I thought it would be easy to get her to be my first girlfriend. And thinking about it, makes one realize that we do things sometimes for the wrong reasons, just because we want something, but in the end, we see that we don't need what we want. And I was lucky enough to be honest with myself to not pursue courting her. In the end, I courted another girl, and this one I really liked, and she became my girlfriend, and the other girl too had a boyfriend. All of us never really ended up with any of our partners in the end, so you know nothing really is set in stone in life, even if you did a grand gesture of love. What does all of this have to do with art? Well, remember I said that I didn't feel anything. Well, one takeaway from this experience for me is that I learned to use my internal compass, my heart. I learned that if I'm not excited about something or even afraid of it, that it's more often than not worth doing for me. Simply because everything that's worth doing, you should at least consult your heart first. And you don't need me to know that if your heart is not in it, don't do it or don't accept it. Our hearts are a compass. We can know if what we are about to do is something we might really regret doing or not doing. Sometimes my heart will let me know something. It can't be quelled when I haven't spoken my piece yet in a conversation or business meeting. At other times, my heart is racing because I'm afraid to speak up or say in a painting a message that I know might be ridiculed or be laughed at. But when I feel this fear, especially if it's a great fear, that I'm almost trembling to do it, I know I really need to do it, and I always do. And I have never regretted that I did, for the rewards of doing so are infinite, and doing the opposite will be the outcome that I'll always regret. It can be what they mean when they say, follow your heart. So let me tell you a story of a time my heart did dance in terror. I was a senior in college and I was in front of my thesis jury, and they're dead silent while looking at me and my huge-ass artwork for my painting thesis. Not only was it a complex piece, but it was also 13 pieces in total, and worst of all, my thesis was about suicide being presented in a Catholic school. And it was at this moment that I knew I was going to have to kill myself in front of my jury to pass and survive my thesis defense. Okay, let's back up for a second. I was in my 4th year of college, and we of course have a painting thesis for us to graduate. We are given the liberty to choose the subject matter we want to discuss with our work. I chose the topic of suicide. I had thoughts of taking my own life before, and I was over the depressing thoughts at this point, but I wanted to explore them to understand what goes through the mind of a person, and how it's tragic if they do so. I also wanted to do it in my own art style. At the time my works are pretty dark. It was always about pain, especially about a man or woman skinned alive feeling constant pain. These figures, even though they're skinned, are still alive and they are in constant pain. That's really what I was focusing on. It's my way of saying that everyone feels pain, and most of us live our lives in pain, either physical pain or emotional pain. We all carry our burdens in life even if it's too painful to live at times. I call these skin figures masochisms as an ode to masochists enjoying emotional humiliation and even loving pain. The figures I created experience pain too much that they have begun to love it and lived with it. It was also a reflection of who I was when I started the masochism art style. I was in a terrible relationship in which I always felt I was being abused by my girlfriend at the time. I guess it was because I never gave her a lunch date with candles and steaks and all that shit at our canteen. That's why she always slapped me in the face anytime she felt like it. Going back to my thesis, I also wanted to make the artwork huge. I wanted to push myself to the edge in terms of my painting skills, and I also thought of, instead of painting just one person in the painting, I'd paint multiple people. 13 suicides in fact, and form them into the iconic composition of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. But all the people are skinned, and are all famous people who committed suicide, and they're eating their flesh in hell in the circle they belong in. I know, it's dark. I had this idea that I can cut the canvas into 13 pieces, so that one suicide is in one canvas, and each canvas that held them has all items and objects which are symbols of their life and demise. Of course, some items overlap with another canvas which then has a new meaning when it belongs to another suicide. Therefore I really had to think of the right people to put together. I remember as I was going to my thesis advisor, Ma'am Baldemar, she said, "You shouldn't be afraid of your jury, they should be the ones afraid of you." She meant that if you really know your shit, your thesis, you should lecture the jury and not cower with every correction they have with your work. And I took what she said to heart, maybe even literally, and this is where I got the silent stare of my jury telling them that I'll be killing myself in front of them. Wait. Before we get to that, I also wanted to let you know that we were allowed to do performance art before we started our thesis. This can be considered as a primer somewhat, and it's completely optional. Other students just hand out sandwiches to the jurors. Me being me, however, I wanted to do something they will never forget. What I did was, I laid down in front of them a small table on which I placed a lot of sharp objects, a knife, scissors, a katana, butterfly knives, a hammer, and other things one can use to harm other people. My jury was laughing at all the things one can use as a weapon, and I took my time taking it out one by one to present it to them. Then I asked them if they could promise that, no matter what, they would not stop me from doing my performance art in front of them. They said okay, sure, whatever, go on. And then after that, I also added that I'm not going to do my performance art at the start. It's going to be a surprise when I do it. It might be at the end of the presentation or even during the critique. My professor, who was quite a character and one of my jurors, impatiently said, "Sure, whatever, get on with it already." To which I then said, "Okay, my performance art is, I'm going to kill myself in front of you." They were all silent. They were suddenly no longer laughing. To which I just responded by saying, "Okay, let's start the defense." They were dumbfounded for quite a bit. I felt that they were in shock. The air was static, and I knew I might get in trouble for doing it, but I did it anyway. I started explaining to them the story of my artwork, naming the suicides and my thesis behind how I executed, no pun intended, the painting in 13 canvases with different meanings. Then it was their turn to ask questions, which I was excited for because I have prepared for all of it because it was my friggin' thesis. As they asked their questions, one gave theirs after the other at a slow pace. I then suddenly realized that all of their questions were boring, that they were never going to ask the questions I wanted them to ask me, so that I could give them a great answer. Time was running out, so when I noticed that this was the case, I raised my hand and said, "Sirs, can I have a suggestion? Instead of you guys asking me a question or two, can I suggest that I just explain everything that you see here in this painting? What does each item mean in its double, triple, or even quadruple meaning when it overlaps on other canvases?" They were glad to give me the floor again, and I couldn't be happier that they agreed. So I went to the very first canvas of the 13 canvases on the far left side, to which I had Adolf Hitler, and then before I even started thinking of what I was about to say, I realized I was fucking scared. For the first time in many years, my knees were knocking, and I felt I was going to die as my mind raised a lot of valid and terrifying questions. What the hell am I doing? I asked myself. How can I have told them I'm going to explain each and everything here just out of nowhere? This was not the plan in the first place. How can I have picked this taboo topic? How can they not fail me after doing all this in front of them? But then I suddenly remembered a show I loved at the time, Lost. In its first episode, two of the lead characters, Jack and Kate, were trying to help each other after their plane crash landed on an island. Jack, a doctor, was injured and had a huge cut on his back, and he asked Kate to stitch it up for him while he instructs her. Kate was terrified to do it since she has never done something like it before, but Jack assures him that she can do it. While Kate was doing her best to start, Jack shared a story to alleviate the mood. She told Kate about the story where he was operating on his patient, a girl. All was going well while he was fixing her spinal injury, but all of a sudden he mistakenly sliced open an important organ that, if he did not act quickly, she would be paralyzed her entire life. Jack froze as he realized the situation. He was so terrified that he couldn't move. But then he remembered something his father taught him. Whenever he's scared, he should give in to the fear for just 5 seconds. And that's all he's going to give it. He will count to 5 and then get back to doing what needs to be done without any fear. And so, while in the operating room, he told Kate, he silently began counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He then immediately sobered up, and then went back into the girl's damaged organ, and he was able to fix it up again. The operation was a success, and the girl was able to walk normally again. As Jack was telling that to Kate, she too took the time to count to 5, to give in to the fear. But then after counting, she mustered up enough courage and stitched Jack up. After which they both went back to the beach to help more survivors of the airplane crash flight 815. And there I was, frozen in fear as if time didn't move for me, as I went back to my thoughts to find the strength to go through with my defense. So I counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I took a deep breath and started to explain every last detail of my thesis. As stated before, these items mean something to each suicide on the canvas. However, if the painted object overlaps with another canvas, it will have another meaning. And so at the top of my head, there were at least 150 meanings of items overall in the artwork. Each meaning had a story or explanation. I was able to tell everything there is about my artwork as my jury only sat silent. It took me about an hour to finish talking about that. I didn't know what they were thinking from their body language, but at that point, I really didn't care what my grade was. All that mattered was, I created a painting that I really and truly believed in. I researched it and talked about every inch of it to my heart's content, and I'm really proud of it. They asked me a few questions afterward, and then it was finally over, but before we officially ended it, I asked them, "Aren't you curious when I'll be killing myself in front of you?" Then my professor jokingly said, "Okay, go ahead, now kill yourself already." To which I replied, "I already did, making this dark artwork, and defending this piece to you, talking about a taboo subject such as suicide in a Catholic school. To me, doing this and still presenting it, is suicide." It was a figurative form of suicide, and I really don't know if they got what I meant by that, but they were all smiling in the end. I really didn't even know if they got what the hell my thesis was all about, but after all was said and done, I was able to be who I really am in front of a jury, and that's what all that mattered, because I think that's what art is all about. Being brave enough to be who you are and defending your work and what your message is to the entire world. And for my thesis, mine was, don't kill yourself. Sure, it might be titled 13 Suicides, but that's just the informal title. The more formal is, Hindi Sila Nakapag Hinter. They couldn't wait in English. They couldn't wait for their actual time to die, they hurried it up. The people, like Kurt Cobain and Vincent van Gogh, either of them being too famous or not praised enough that they took their lives nonetheless. Or like Hitler, after losing the war shot himself from cowardice, or Ninoy Aquino, knowing he'd be assassinated, still went back to the Philippines, stating that, the Filipino people is worth dying for. Or it doesn't matter if you don't believe in God or you do, as my middle piece was Judas Iscariot, hanging himself, knowing full well the miracles of Jesus, but still betraying him and taking his own life. These are all the people I painted in my thesis. And you can imagine how much more there is to it in the painting itself, that I can't fit here in this essay. I'll just link the video here of me talking about my thesis to undergraduates in 𝐷𝐷. It's a full video of me talking about this essay and my grade. They gave me a solid 1, which was the highest grade. My artwork was also exhibited twice, and once for our gallery thesis show, and another one for the best thesis exhibit of that year. I was really glad. It even boosted my grades enough so that I graduated cum laude. I never really planned all of it, the show, having high grades, graduating with honors. That was never really my thing. I mean, my parents were proud of me, of course, but I really didn't do it for the grades. And maybe that's the reason why I got so high of a score. For me, it was just making art the way I want, with the things I wanted to say. Pushing myself and even discovering a new thing or two about my interests and even about myself. If your heart is not uneasy, it's not worth doing. If you aren't even nervous, if you're not the least bit afraid, it's not worth doing. This has been my compass this entire time during this thesis defense. In fact, as I was conceptualizing it, my heart was also my compass, weighing things if I should do something small or big. And you know what? It has always led me to something I'm proud of in the end, because our hearts know who we are, and when we follow where it points us, if we follow where it leads us, we will discover the path that was always meant for us and only us. If right now you don't find yourself even afraid of saying what you're going to say in an essay, a comment, or a painting, you don't really have anything to say. If you are nervous about something, then you don't really care much about it. But if you saw this asshole guy making a move on someone you secretly like, and you know that they will only break their heart, no matter who you are, you will feel this fear, this uneasiness just watching this situation. And soon enough you can't take it anymore, so you instead finally make a move on the girl. And once and for all you realize that you just don't like her, you love her, and you confess your love to her, and she loves you back. And even if you're not a guy who picks a fight, you'll beat the living shit out of that asshole guy if he flirts with your girl again. And the next thing you know, you and the girl are married, and you guys have a son living in a beautiful apartment, living both your dreams. I know, because that's me and my wife I'm talking about. All because I followed what my heart was telling me, even if my brain didn't know I loved the girl. That's why it was hurting seeing someone make a move on her. You can also use this in art. Think of a project, a concept, or an idea. If it doesn't turn you on or get you excited, it's probably a dud. If you are not afraid right now with an endeavor, then you might not be doing the very best you can with that art project. It might soon fail, or maybe be easily forever forgotten. And I don't mean to be flashy like a grand gesture, that hardly ever really works. I'm talking about a deeper movement, the one that moves your heart, and other people's hearts too. What is it? Well, that's for your heart to decide what makes it race and make you terrified. Do that. Make it worth your while, make it memorable, and make it with all your heart and without regrets. Let your work and your words show who you really are to the world. Let your heart be your compass, and follow that throb in your heart.